Shalom WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week we'll be studying Parshat Emor. And I wanted to use it as a chance to talk a little bit about grief and loss, something that inevitably part of the human condition is that we will experience grief and loss as a symbol of how much we love and are privileged to be able to be in relationship and connections of love with people. One of the hard parts of human existence, and one that every religion must address, is what do we do about the fact that those ties must someday come to an end. And so in Parshat Emor, we start out with this command that God says to the people, Emor el ha-kohanim b'nei Aharon v'amarta alehem. Say to the Kohanim, the priesthood, the children of Aaron, and say to them, L'nefesh lo yitameh b'amav, that you shouldn't allow yourselves to become impure by death. And it's, from among your people. Meaning that they shouldn't come in contact with a dead body or something like that. It's an old part of the impurity laws of the temple cult. Cult meaning the religious order, that they couldn't make sacrifices unless they were in a state of purity. And the impurity of contact with death is the highest level of impurity that there can be. Despite the fact that it was a sacrificial cult based on the sacrifice of animals, at the same time, it's very clear, maybe these laws exist to show us that we shouldn't revere death or worship death. In a way that, let's say, Egyptian culture and the Book of the Dead and things we've learned about it really venerated death as a great next step in the journey of life. We also think of it as a great next step in the journey of life, but also shouldn't become too infatuated with death such that we forget about life as we experience it here. So that's sort of the ancient roots. But what is it supposed to mean to us in modern times when the priesthood is not making animal sacrifices? An evolution of the religion for which I'm grateful, from animal sacrifice to prayer. But if that's the case, do these laws have any meaning? And the answer is I think they do. I think they have deep meaning. And I want to share a comment of the Mei HaShiloach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe. First came to my attention in the JTS weekly emailed Devar Torah, written this week by Professor Yitz Landis, who's an assistant professor at JTS of Rabbinic Literatures and Cultures. And he brings this comment from the Ishbitzer. And what the Ishbitzer says is that, first of all, when it says the Kohanim here, don't be too confused. Don't worry. It doesn't mean Kohen only. It means anyone who's trying to serve God, anyone who has faith, anyone who's given at least part of their life over to sort of this great Jewish project of bringing holiness into the world and awareness of God's presence into the world and making the world better through the teachings of Torah and the wisdom and values of our people, for Jewish people and all people all over the world. If you are one of those people, you are an Oved Hashem, a servant of God. And therefore, when we are a kingdom of priests, so to speak. And so ultimately, this command is actually given over for all of us. So we're all included in this command not to become impurified by death. And what does the Ishbitzer say that means? He says that these Oved Hashem, what it means to be an Oved Hashem, a servant of God, is to recognize God's power in the world. And he says when we experience tragedy, we may become angry with God. He says that that's fine, because one who believes that the world is run by chance has no address for his grievances, right? If we are struck by grief and we are angry over an injustice that we see take place, especially in the loss of a loved one, we may feel you know what, I think there is no God. If there's no God, then we're not angry. We're just depressed. The world has no sense of order for us. However, if we believe that God runs everything, it makes sense, to become angry at God, and we shouldn't feel bad about that. It is a response to God's judgments that makes us feel badly, and we need to work that out in our relationship with God. That is different from saying there is no God. And it's fascinating, and Professor Landis mentions this also, that it kind of turns things on its head, that we may think when we see someone in grief and angry with God, that that's a rejection of religion. But the Ishbitzer says, no, that is in fact an indication of how deep one's relationship with God is. It's if they don't care and they say, well, that's just the way the world works, that is ultimately a rejection of God. But that's not usually how we would think of it. I was inspired particularly by this, having last week gotten the opportunity to see, thanks to the UJA Federation and the Westchester Jewish Council, Rachel Goldberg Polin speak about her new book, When I See You Again. A beautiful book, even the cover, the way this piece of tape sort of elicits the piece of tape that people wore to count down, to count the days in which people like Rachel's son Hersh had been in captivity, held hostage by Hamas. She's become this extraordinary symbol. She is an icon of faith and steadfastness, even in the face of tragedy. And this book, which is a really deep and difficult exploration of pain and suffering and what it means to lose a child, and what it means to experience that deep pain of loss in this world, ultimately coming from her, who is also an amazing spiritual teacher, and it comes from a place of faith. And many of her teachings are grounded in faith. And there's clear pain and anger and frustration and obviously deep sadness. Anyone who has heard her speak or seen her speak knows this. And at the same time, something inspiring about how she still finds her grounding and her foundation in our rich tradition. She quoted Viktor Frankl, without even knowing it, saying, toxic positivity drives her. It upsets her when people try and, and yet she's obviously optimistic. And so she calls it tragic optimism. Someone taught her that phrase. It turns out it's a phrase of Viktor Frankl, the renowned psychologist, Holocaust survivor. Said, even when we see this terrible suffering and in the midst of tragedy, we still feel optimistic and hopeful. Not toxically positive, it's all going to be okay, there's really goodness to see here, but say that even in the pain, there is reason to be optimistic because we have faith. That tragic optimism that is so inspiring to see, as it was for Viktor Frankl in Rachel Goldberg Polin, is very much alive in this part of the Torah. And remember, it's Aaron who lost his 2 sons and manages to continue forward. And now is getting these laws that, you shouldn't be contaminated by death, meaning you shouldn't let death allow you to think that the world has no purpose or that everything is random, that in fact there's faith and there is a plan, not only for the whole entire world, but even hashgachat prati, even this, that God pays attention even to each and every individual, that we do have a task and we do have a reason to move forward. And that doesn't mean we won't experience pain and loss. It just means that that pain and loss is not meaningless, even if we can't understand it right now. I hope you'll have the opportunity to read Rachel Goldberg Polin's book. It really helps explain this in a way that, and I certainly hope no one takes it this way, not to belittle the pain and the loss. Chas v'chalila, God forbid that we would do that. And I certainly don't put myself in the place of anyone who has experienced this kind of pain. And I don't want to belittle it. And I hope that people can find their way to faith, that perhaps that expression of anger and seeing that as an expression of faith, if nothing else, helps us feel a little less alone in these moments that we will all inevitably experience of pain and the feeling of betrayal that sometimes is dealt to us by the circumstances of life and our human condition. this tragic optimism is the tool that Judaism gives us to deal with life as we know it. And that's what a real spirituality, a true religion does. It doesn't promise everything's going to be just great now. It doesn't promise constant ecstasy, but it does promise that there are tools for which taking the world, even its ugly sides, and even the times when we feel the injustice and the anger and the betrayal, and say, even with the world being the way it is, there are ways that we can deal with it. There are ways that we can still find the richness, the beauty, and the meaning. And that path leads also to God, even as much as the joy and the miracles of life and birth and celebration of all that we share in those connections. In the loss, there is also foundations for faith. May we all find them and have little opportunity to have to explore this side of religion, but may we find strength in it at the times that we need it. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.